Happy Halloween, listener. October 31st, 2024. And tonight, we are diving deep into a horror classic.
Okay.
We're going to peel back the layers of one of the most iconic villains in cinematic history.
Right.
Leatherface.
Leatherface.
Ah.
He's a fascinating study in terror, isn't he? Not a ghost.
Right.
Not a demon, but something much more unsettling. A twisted reflection of humanity.
Yeah, that's what's so brilliant about him.
Right.
He blurs the lines between monster and man.
Exactly.
So where did this nightmare begin? What were the inspirations behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the creation of Leatherface?
Well, to understand Leatherface, we need to first delve into the darkness that inspired him.
Oh.
The filmmakers drew inspiration from a real-life figure, Ed Gein, a notorious murderer whose crimes shocked the nation.
It wasn't just the murders, was it? There's something particularly disturbing about Gein's hobbies.
Exactly. Gein's crafted masks and other items from human skin. This macabre detail became a defining element of Leatherface, adding a chilling layer of realism to his monstrous persona. It made him tangible, grounded in a reality that was almost too horrific to contemplate.
And that's what makes Leatherface so terrifying. He's not some supernatural boogeyman. He's a human being.
Right.
Capable of unspeakable acts. It taps into that primal fear, the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of humanity.
Absolutely. The creators wanted to explore that darkness to create a villain who was terrifyingly human.
Right.
But they also wanted to go beyond just mindless brutality. They wanted Leatherface to be a product of his environment, a tragic figure warped by his twisted family and upbringing.
Yeah, I read that director Tobe Hooper had a personal experience that deeply influenced Leatherface's design.
Oh, yeah.
Something about a Halloween party and a friend wearing a rather unsettling mask.
Yes. Apparently, a friend of Hooper's showed up at a party wearing a cadaver mask.
Yeah.
The image of this seemingly ordinary person suddenly transformed into something grotesque stayed with Hooper, and it's easy to see how it translated into the unsettling nature of Leatherface's masks.
It's that uncanny valley effect, something that looks almost human, but just off enough to send chills down your spine. And speaking of unsettling, the inspiration for Leatherface's physicality came from a surprising source. Baby Huey, that large, clumsy cartoon duck. Not exactly the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a horror villain, is it?
No, but that juxtaposition is part of what makes Leatherface so unnerving. Here's this hulking figure in a grotesque mask.
Right.
Wielding a chainsaw, yet there's a childlike innocence. A simplicity to his demeanor. You're never quite sure what to expect from him.
Yeah.
Which makes him all the more unpredictable and frightening.
It's a brilliant blend of the familiar and the grotesque.
I agree.
But of course, it takes more than just a concept to bring a character like this to life. Enter Gunnar Hansen, the man behind the mask in the original film.
Gunnar Hansen's portrayal is truly iconic. He brought a raw, unsettling energy to the role. He did extensive research into mental disabilities to portray Leatherface's childlike mentality authentically.
And he really suffered for his art, didn't he? I heard the conditions on set were brutal. The Texas heat, the heavy mask and costume.
Absolutely. And then there were the physical demands of the role. There's a story about Hansen accidentally giving an actor a black eye while filming a scene with a prop sledgehammer. Apparently, the mask's eye holes were so tiny that his vision was incredibly limited.
Talk about method acting.
Yeah.
He wasn't just pretending to be Leatherface. He was experiencing the world through those limited senses, feeling that frustrated rage. It adds a whole other level of intensity to his performance.
And let's not forget one of the most iconic moments in the film, the chainsaw dance at the end.
Oh, yeah.
That chilling, frenzied dance of frustration and exhaustion was partially improvised by Hansen.
Wow.
It perfectly captures Leatherface's chaotic energy and adds a haunting finality to the film.
Speaking of haunting, we've got to talk about those masks. Each one is more unsettling than the last, each one telling a story.
The masks are more than just a visual element. They represent the fractured psyche of Leatherface, each mask.
Right.
The killing mask, the old lady mask, the pretty woman mask.
Oh, yeah.
Represents a different facet of his personality. They're a way for him to navigate his twisted world, to cope with the darkness that surrounds him.
And the level of detail in those masks. The filmmakers used real human hair animal bones. They even incorporated baby teeth into the construction.
It's a disturbing level of realism meant to evoke a primal sense of unease in the audience. The baby teeth in particular add a layer of perversity and innocence that is both unsettling and strangely poignant.
It's as if they wanted to make you question your own revulsion, to make you feel complicit in the horror. It's a brilliant, albeit disturbing artistic choice.
And it highlights the filmmaker's commitment to creating a truly unforgettable villain. They didn't shy away from the grotesque. They embraced it, pushing the boundaries of horror cinema.
But here's where it gets really interesting, this concept of the masks representing different personalities, a shifting psyche. It's something that kind of gets lost in later interpretations of Leatherface.
You're right. In many of the sequels, the masks become more about shock value, about the gore, rather than that subtle psychological complexity that made the original so effective.
So Leatherface evolves, but not always in a consistent way.
Yeah.
It raises the question, which version is the most terrifying?
Right.
The confused, obedient child driven by his family, or the brutal, sadistic killer he becomes in some interpretations?
And how much of that evolution was intentional, a deliberate exploration of the character's psyche versus a result of different directors and writers putting their own spin on things?
It's a fascinating question, and one that we'll explore as we delve further into the twisted legacy of Leatherface. We're dealing with multiple Leatherfaces, each one a reflection of the filmmaker's vision and the changing landscape of horror cinema itself.
It's fascinating how a character can evolve so much over time. Speaking of evolution, let's talk about how Leatherface changes throughout the sequels. Where do we even begin with this twisted family tree of terror?
Well, as we discussed, the first film presents Leatherface as very much a product of his family.
Right. Mentally disabled, driven by fear and a warped sense of obedience. He's almost childlike in a way, despite his brutality. Then we get the sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and things take a rather bizarre turn.
Bizarre is putting it mildly. The sequel shifts toward a more comedic, over-the-top tone, and Leatherface, well, he develops a strange infatuation with a radio DJ named Stretch. He even dances with her while wielding his chainsaw.
Talk about mixed signals. It's a far cry from the terrified, obedient figure in the original. Wow. So some interpret this as Leatherface experiencing human emotions, a sign of, well, let's call it growth, but others see it as just another facet of his madness.
Either way, it's a drastic departure from the original portrayal. It makes you wonder what the filmmakers were trying to achieve with this shift in tone and characterization.
Perhaps they were trying to capitalize on the popularity of the slasher genre at the time, which often embraced humor and over-the-top gore. But in doing so, they arguably sacrificed some of the psychological depth that made the first film so effective.
Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre III, seemed to course-correct a bit, returning to a darker, more serious tone.
Yes, but it also introduced some new wrinkles. This Leatherface is more outwardly brutal with a hint of sadism that wasn't as prominent in the original. There's even a suggestion that he might have a daughter, adding a layer of twisted family dynamics to the mix.
A daughter? Yikes. It seemed like they were trying to explore different facets of Leatherface's personality, pushing the boundaries of his depravity.
Then the next generation throws us another curveball.
Oh.
This Leatherface is a cross-dresser wearing the skin of his female victims. It's a bold and unsettling choice that further blurs the lines between his monstrous nature and his warped humanity.
It's definitely a departure from the original, but it also speaks to the enduring fascination with Leatherface as a character. Filmmakers keep finding new ways to interpret and reinterpret him,
right,
exploring different aspects of his personality and motivations.
And then, of course, we have the remakes and prequels.
Yes.
Starting in 2003, these films often lean into the more traditional slasher tropes, with Leatherface becoming more of a hulking, relentless killing machine.
There's less emphasis on psychological complexity and more focus on pure, visceral horror. The backstory gets tweaked too. He's still mentally challenged, but there's this added element of him being bullied and ostracized because of his skin condition.
Which, when we connect this to the bigger picture, reinforces that theme of Leatherface as a victim himself, shaped by the cruelty of others. It's a classic nature versus nurture debate.
Right.
How much of who he is predetermined and how much is a result of his environment.
The prequel, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, delves even deeper into this idea, showing us a young Leatherface who isn't inherently evil but gradually becomes twisted through abuse and manipulation.
It's a chilling reminder that monsters aren't born, they're made. And in Leatherface's case, he was created by a monstrous family and a cruel world.
It's interesting how, despite all these different interpretations, there's still something about that original Leatherface, that confused, almost pitiful figure that lingers in the mind.
Absolutely. The original film tapped into something primal and unsettling. It wasn't just about the gore, it was about the fear of the unknown, the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of humanity, and that fear resonates even today, decades later.
Then we jump to 2017 with another prequel, Leatherface.
Yes.
This one goes even further back, exploring his childhood and the events that shaped his dark destiny.
This film highlights how a seemingly ordinary boy can be molded into a monster through a toxic combination of genetics and environment. It's a chilling exploration of the roots of evil and the enduring impact of trauma.
And then after all these years and various interpretations, we get the 2022 film, which offers a unique take on Leatherface.
Yeah.
He's older now, almost a recluse, living with an elderly caretaker. There's a sense of, well, not peace exactly,
Right.
but a kind of stability in his life.
Until, of course, that stability is shattered and the monster reemerges. What's so disturbing about this version is that it blurs the lines even further.
Yeah.
There's a sense of vulnerability to him, a dependence on his caretaker that almost makes you feel a flicker of sympathy almost.
And then he goes on a rampage, reminding everyone that the beast is still there lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah.
The way he creates his new mask from his caretaker's face, it's both heartbreaking and horrifying.
It speaks to a twisted sense of loyalty, a desperate attempt to hold on to a connection even in death. It's a disturbing reminder that even in his monstrous state, Leatherface is capable of a twisted form of love and attachment.
Yeah, it adds a whole new layer of tragedy to the character, doesn't it? He's a monster, yes, but he's also a victim shaped by forces beyond his control.
Precisely. And it makes you question, is he truly evil, or is he simply a product of his horrific upbringing, unable to escape the cycle of violence that has defined his life?
So after all these years and all these different interpretations,
Yeah.
what do you think makes Leatherface such an enduring horror icon? Why does he continue to fascinate and terrify us?
I think it's because he taps into something primal and universal, the fear of the unknown, the darkness that exists within ourselves and in the world around us. Leatherface is a symbol of that darkness, a reminder that even in the most seemingly civilized societies, savagery can lurk just beneath the surface.
He's also a reflection of our anxieties about family, about the ways in which our upbringing can shape us, for better or for worse.
Absolutely.
Leatherface is a product of a toxic family dynamic, and his story serves as a cautionary tale about the devastating impact of abuse and neglect.
And let's not forget the sheer visceral impact of his appearance and his weapon of choice.
Right.
The grotesque mask, the roaring chainsaw.
Oh, yeah.
It's a combination that's both terrifying and strangely compelling.
Pure nightmare fuel Leatherface is a figure that's designed to get under your skin and stay there.
He's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones that go bump in the night, but the ones that look just like us, the ones that could be lurking right next door.
And that's a thought that's sure to keep you up at night. Happy Halloween, listener. Sleep tight. And if you hear a chainsaw, well, you've been warned.